we're sending teams that are going 3-15 to Worlds, and we have good players that could be helping us out that aren't even getting a chance to play any LCS games. Like, there's a lot of things wrong with our current system, and I think they're all adding up to what you're seeing. But I don't think it's like one, hey, if we do this, then we're going to win 9 games.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Rob and Germ Show. I'm Rob. He's Germ. We both returned from New York City. How are we doing, my friend?
Doing good. New York was definitely interesting. I know that I don't ever want to live there, but it was definitely an interesting visit.
I feel the same way. Sorry for you New Yorkians. I know that's not correct, but it doesn't matter. It was well, maybe it does matter. I don't know if that offends people, I guess. But New York is absolutely a cool place. The smells, the sounds, very, very, very cool. But for people like me, and I'm sure like you, it's pretty overwhelming. I will be honest. I don't know how it feels. The way I described it to family, because I went when I was younger, but this was the second time I had gone. First time I was gone as an adult, and I was like, it felt like I was at like Disneyland or something, where there's just people packed all the time, literally every second. And being from the Midwest, I'm not used to that. So very interesting, to say the least. But I'm very excited, or not excited, I guess, to talk about. I'm excited to talk to you, but I'm not excited about what we have to talk about today, which is the LCS's performance at Worlds. Historic lows. The LCS, correct me if I'm wrong, went 3-15 in the group stage. Evil Geniuses obviously had a 7-1 record heading into that. So I guess if you really wanted to be kind to NA, you could, say that, with Evil Geniuses alone, we went 10-16, but I don't really count that because half that competition shouldn't even be able to beat some of our worst teams on their good days. So, yeah, I mean, this one's a little bit more off the cuff for us. We normally have a little bit more planned, but I think this is going to be us venting a little bit of frustration on their playing and a little bit more discussion. And I think the first thing I want to talk about with you, Germ, on this one is, like, why did it take us so long to adapt to the meta? It's not like we played 2 games on the first day, I don't believe, for our teams. And even by that point, you had seen the meta working for something else. Now, I get it's hard to change the meta after 1 day of games, but it really felt like the LCS and the LCK had been practicing together. We saw the LCK struggle, but they adapted very quickly. And the LCS was like, nah, we're just going to keep with our strategy. We're going to have Fudge try to outskill some of the best top laners in the world. And I'm not just gonna like crap on him. Like that's not what this is gonna be about. But there are major questions to me, and this has always been something that I've struggled with coaching staffs and coaching in general. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on just like, why does it take the LCS so long to adapt? Because it's not even just at Worlds. Even in the LCS, most of the teams take forever to adapt to a meta that's established basically in every other country or every other region within 2 weeks. It takes the LCS like 4 weeks to adapt to it, and by then they're already changing to the next one. It's very frustrating to me.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. Obviously, this is like a super, super, super in-depth topic with a ton of nuance and stuff. I would say, off the top of my head in general, I think it's fair to say that LCS coaching staffs, management infrastructure are probably just like pretty shit overall, like just not that strong. But that's like obviously like an easy like cop-out answer or whatever. And I don't think that's the whole thing. Some of the other thoughts that were like initially coming to the top of my head as well is like, it's like, should they adjust sooner, this, that, whatever. But it's like, also at the end of the day, I understand because it's just a couple best of ones, like in week 1, you're talking about 3 best of ones for each team. And if you're Cloud9, you're like watching the other tournament. And even if some other teams struggle with certain picks or whatever, it's like, maybe, we're better than them, or we can pull this off, or maybe we just think they lost to a better team and the picks didn't really matter. Like it's kind of hard to, in such a small sample size of games and them being played by other teams with a million other variables, I think some of that stuff can be hard. And then with the Fudge stuff, I get it if you think, like, oh, hey, like he's not going to be able to go toe to toe with some of the best top laners in the world, yada, yada. But like, also at the same time, Fudge has had good international performances before.
Sure.
Some of those picks were counter picks too, where it's like, it's not even necessarily a skill matchup. It's just like, you just got a winning matchup, which you really need to be able to pull off. Like, I don't fault the coach if they like got them a good pick and like failed to pull it off. And I struggle too, because it's like, I do think if you go in with the mindset of like, oh, Fudge isn't as good as the people we're going to be playing up against, so he's going to be playing Ornn this whole tournament, like, you kind of defeated yourself a little bit before you even started too, and like that feels kind of bad. I get why people are saying that too, but it's also like, if I believe in Fudge, I'm like, maybe we can do some of this stuff, or maybe he is that good. And if you're just like, hey, we suck at every position, so we need to play Ornn and Seraphine, and like, that doesn't seem great either. It's different, but is it better? I don't know.
Yeah, and I mean, you're not wrong. They had to have confidence. I had confidence in Fudge. He looked really good. Yeah. I mean, he was just top gapping most everybody during playoffs. And, this isn't to say, again, that it is all his fault. It really wasn't. It's clear that...
example.
Yeah, it's clear to me that everybody just, like... It felt like the LCS had just a really bad week. And truly, I do believe that... And this is going to probably be controversial, but I do believe skill-wise, the LCS was at least comparable to the EU. Not just because of results, but I think if NA had figured out the meta even just like after their first game, I think if they win one more game in week 1, I believe that after getting that first win, right, it feels a little less insurmountable, right? Because then you're at 2 wins. You only need realistically 1 to either make it or at least get a tiebreaker. This is kind of the path that the LCS has taken. They normally lose the tiebreaker, but I do believe that there's something that needs to be done. Somebody needs to be held accountable for this, because you just can't have a region sending 3 teams that go 3-15. It's just unacceptable. Now, again, the LEC didn't do that much better, right? Rogue did better, but then their last 2 games and the tiebreaker game, they kind of got their asses handed to them, right? So it's like they figured out the meta in week 1. They took advantage of it. Good for them. But at the same time, that's where I think, and I'm not blaming the structure for the LCS's bad performance at all, but I do think that for teams that are at a skill disadvantage, also being at a meta disadvantage absolutely pretty much puts you behind the 8 ball, to the point where what's even the point of going out and playing when you're gonna just be that bad, right? And you could tell in week 2, at least in my opinion, every LCS team not only got a win, but they looked better even against the better teams. They weren't great, but most of their second games were like, we're competitive, at least through most of it,
Somewhat competitive,
yeah. And so I don't know, there's a discussion to be had. I think I put out a tweet about this, and I believe that this is the truth. I went back and I looked, Germ, and the last season that the LCS and the LEC ran best of 3s, I believe, was 2017. At least the LCS I know for sure, because I have that up right in front of me right now. And the world's performance for these teams were that Cloud9 got out of play-ins by absolutely just dominating everybody. Then in a group of SKT, AHQ, and Edward Gaming, they also came out ahead. Immortals went 2-4 in a tougher group, but they were able to, take down Fnatic in a game, and I believe one of their Longzhu Gaming games were close. And then TSM unfortunately lost out to that Misfits team that took T1 to the brink in this year. While not substantially better, I went back and I remembered some of these games, and I looked up some of the stats and whatnot. These games were closer, right? There is a very distinct difference, and they didn't have such a problem picking up the meta during this time period, right? And my biggest argument, and something that I don't think is being talked about with the LCS right now, and I understand that the Clearly, they are doing it for the entertainment value. But if you are losing NA fans and NA viewers, which we'll talk about in another video, I believe winning solves everything. And if NA and EU were performing better at Worlds, I believe a lot of issues in terms of viewership and things would be solved. And one of the things I want to talk to you about is bringing back best of threes. And I wanted to get your thoughts on kind of how, do you believe that best of threes coming back would potentially help these LCS teams? Would we see a better performance in your mind, and maybe not see the 3 and 15s that we just went through?
Yeah, it's hard for me because I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I do believe that some of those prior results could be potentially a little misleading. I'm not saying that you're like, trying to do like trick us or something like that, but I do know that just in general, our results in the past used to be better than they are today. Like, we used to have teams in these tiebreakers. We used to have a team get out every once in a while. EU used to have more teams get out every once in a while. So like, it just, in general, things are just trending in the wrong direction. And like, I do think best of threes would help. I don't think it's like a cure-all, but I think there's so many things that are going wrong, and there's so many little positive adjustments that could be made and negative adjustments that have been made over time, that like could get us more back on track. I definitely think best of threes would be great. And I think the argument for best of threes gets better, especially as viewership drops, because like if you're worried about viewership dropping due to best of threes, it's like, okay, well, we're clearly not like maximizing viewership at this point in time anyway, with some of the changes we're talking about and stuff. So like you said, maybe try to do this, make the region better, and we start winning more. Maybe that's a way to get some stuff back. I do think that playing more games would obviously have our teams be better practiced and better prepared, have more strategies ready to go. And also, one of the biggest things in my eyes is that it would give some of this younger, more hungry talent more opportunities to actually play games. And to me,
games that matter. Games that matter. I think that is very important.
Yeah. And to me, that's one of the things is the biggest issues. It's like, we only have 10 teams, so we only have 50 slots. And there's like more than 50 good and interesting players in the LCS ecosystem right now. Maybe some of them that deserve to be on their way out or whatever, but these new guys are like a little bit riskier. But like, to me, it's an absolute disservice that Tenacity, Busio, all these guys aren't in the LCS. Whether I think they can actually help us, like, oh, they're going to go to Worlds and pop off. No, they're going to make our other players better. Like, you saw Jojo Pune come in this year, and he got better over the course of the year, but he made everybody else get better by pushing them and challenging them. And you don't want to lose the rookie, but also he's just doing new things. You even saw Chime come in with TSM. Kind of, he's like 23 or something. He's not like a super young, like cracked Zoomer or nothing, but he's just a breath of fresh air, a guy that's hungry, a guy looking to prove himself. And he looked really damn good. And he wasn't the number one academy he was one of the higher prospects, but it's not like everyone was like, oh, Chime's the best, and then all the other academy guys suck. It's like he's in a group of like other players that are comparable or better to him. So like, we're sending teams that are going 3 and 15 to Worlds, and we have good players that could be helping us out that aren't even getting a chance to play any LCS games. Like, there's a lot of things wrong with our current system, and I think they're all adding up to what you're seeing. But I don't think it's like one, hey, if we do this, then we're going to win 9 games.
No, and you're not wrong. You're not wrong. And like, I don't want to harp too hard on the games portion of it, because I do think players getting more time. But like you said, can you imagine if JoJo got what the LCK gets, which is like 40 games in one split? They do more games in one split than we do in 2, right? And even if you count lock-in, you're only guaranteed 4 more games. So it's still about the same as one split, and the LCS was like this. TSM in 2017 spring played 47 games. 47 games. I understand that that's a lot, but one of the things that I pointed out on Twitter, and something that I hope that more people will consider, is every player I talk to, every coach I talk to, every interview that I hear talking about game state and everything. And again, this is not going to become some like Champions Queue crusade where everybody's like, you need to have Champions Crew, or that's the only way to make it better. Like no, like it definitely helps, but it isn't the only way. And what I will say is every team, everything that I've heard is stage games are the best, because you are playing in a live situation that's going to make you better as a result. And so, yes, while we have been getting worse over time. And even actually one of our best performances was 2018 when Cloud9 made it to semis. The first year that they didn't do, the best of 3 system. I still believe that more games on stage where the teams actually have to take it seriously, because apparently scrims, some teams just don't scrim some weeks at all. Right. And if you're going to go play, go play. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. And I think your point about, us having bad meta reads and stuff, it's how valuable even are our scrims? We're scrimming leading up to Worlds, obviously. And the conclusions we're getting from those games aren't even all that useful or helpful or whatever. And we hear so many stories of the scrim warriors, and then the people who go on stage and play completely different. It's so what are we doing if we're just doing?
And people hide stuff in scrims, dude. People hide things because they don't want people to find things out.
That's my issue with the LOL esports system in general. It's okay, pro sports whatever, the Reds, they're not scrimming the Cubs before their games that week or whatever. The whole system is already really stupid and really flawed, and it's gonna have issues. So the fact that we're potentially even doing a stupider version of an already bad system is just so bad. So get them on stage. Stop doing these stupid things that aren't even helping.
And do internal scrims, find your own meta. And we also have times where people are well, champion pools are shit. Well, do you think if they played, I don't know, 25 to 30 more games a split, that might be a thing that is solved, because they have to play so many games that they find teams will find out if Armut, right, really can only play Gnar, there's no chance that he's going to get that for 40 plus games in one split, right? He's going to have to learn to play other things when things are like that. And to people who are well, that's extra work for the players. Dude, they go home and play League of Legends anyways.
They're addicted like everybody else.
Yeah, and yes, there is a chance for them to burn out, but that's where it's more important, because then you don't have to worry about scrims. You come in every day, you scrim yourselves, you practice your strategies, then you go on stage and you play best of 3s, and voila, you're learning more from that, and you allow your strategic coaches who aren't having to play every day to have more data to analyze. It's just such a simple process to me, and I know for the broadcast and everything, it may not be that simple. I get it. I really truly understand that. But if this league, if these Western teams are ever going to have a chance, I will tell you, the number one thing that I am seeing today, especially with all of the Eastern players that are coming over and they're complaining, solo queue is terrible and the practice environments here are terrible, then go play on stage, because you have to take that seriously. That's how you make your money. There is a very clear difference between the East and the West still. And truly, when when we were taking 3 out of the 8 slots, as in the West, we're taking 3 out of the 8 slots going into Worlds, it was happening more often when we were playing more games. That is just something you can go look up. So yeah, I don't know. It's really hard to see the LCS play as badly as it did, and I don't understand also I'm struggling with them just being straight up well, yeah, we're just not as skilled. I get it. That's a fair assumption, or that's a fair critique of yourself. But what are you going to do to fix that? It can't just be every year that oh, we're just straight up worse. Okay, well then how do they get so much better, right? Is there just an inherent thing that they are better at League of Legends for? I think partially it's because they've been playing it for longer. In terms of it's much more of a cultural thing there in the East, right? Both in Korea and China, and with PC bangs and everything, they're literally starting to play at 10 or 12 and more competitive environments than most of our players are. But it is very frustrating, man. I really wish we had an answer, but the teams looked terrible. I would argue the best team, and it wasn't just because we got to see them more, was by far and away Evil Geniuses, and I still have to wonder what would have happened if Danny would have stayed with the team. It's hard for me to believe that team wouldn't have won at least 2 more games, to be honest with you. And it's not that Cowrie was bad, by the way, either. Cowrie was fine, but there are nuances to the game where you lose some of that stuff, where you've only been playing with a guy for a month, and all in high pressure situations. It's not like you had a full 2 splits. So I don't know. You got any other thoughts on this before we get on out of here in a few minutes?
Yeah, my last big thing is just kind of, I hope that with the LCS teams and players and stuff that this feeling kind of like sets in, and I hope, they take the offseason to think about this. Like, yeah, we just got, pretty embarrassed, pretty, clapped and stuff. We came in not super, super confident because obviously the last couple of years haven't gone that well either. But yeah, this is like a new low. This is like historically bad. On top of the fact that there's all this talk of viewership and is the LCS dying and all that stuff on top of playing really, really terribly. And I hope, they can reflect on like, did I do everything I possibly could have this year to like prepare for this moment? Did I do everything I could have to get as good as I could have and take that into next year? Like, what can I do to help myself? What can I do to help my teammates? What can I do to help the region? Because everyone like wants to point fingers of like, oh, well, I play against a bunch of teams that suck, or I scrim against a bunch of players that suck. Like I'm, scrimming against Immortals, I'm never going to be good enough to take on all these teams, yada, yada. But it's like, everyone is involved in that process, and it's like, if the people at the top aren't as good as they can be and the people at the bottom aren't as good as they can be, it affects everything. So I just hope that these feelings, frustration, sadness, embarrassment, whatever, I hope they hang on to these in a productive way over the next couple months, and I hope we see some changes from everyone, league side, player side, team side, going into 2023 and beyond.
Yeah, and I'll agree with you. And while again I harped on one point, I will say there's not one thing like you said that we can do. What the LCS needs to start doing though is start hammering away at different aspects and trying to make things better in different ways. I think they're getting there. I think the teams investing more into younger players is going to start happening, even more so. With I think JoJo could literally be the savior of this entire. He could be the savior of this entire league, to be completely frank. And I don't even think that's that hot of a take, to be honest with you. And I believe, the influence that he has had is going to help. I think Champions Queue, if I'm teams, I'm requiring it in your contract. You got to play a certain amount of hours of Champions Queue. It needs to happen, because if that's the best scrim system or best practice tool that we have available to us, then you need to do it. So
yeah, I saw an interesting Reddit post. It's just like random last thought too. I saw a Reddit post that was like, so much of the old popularity and success of these leagues were like, oh, our favorite players, they would play in LCS and they'd stream all the time and they'd be like these big streamers and we'd watch them on stage and all that stuff. And it's like, so few of the pro players stream anymore. So few of them are like big personalities, and that's fine. They are professional players at the end of the day. They have crazy schedules, all this stuff. Yep. But there's two aspects. Either it's entertainment or it's competition. And, if we're streaming and growing the viewership and everything, that's all good. We can maybe forgive some of the lack of like winning and all that stuff. But when we're not growing viewership, we don't have huge personalities. So you're not streaming and you're not playing Champions Queue. It's like, what are you doing? You're just going to scrims and then, kind of chilling the rest of the day. Like, yeah. And especially because 70% of the teams have like a 5 or 6 month off season. Like, you can do more during the season for sure.
Yep.
Whether it's entertainment side or competition side. And that's what's frustrating to me, that we're getting to this point of like the worst of everything.
I mean, they have one of the biggest off seasons in professional sports.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
I mean, most professional sports teams have like 3 months off. Baseball's, I think, maybe the longest, where you play into October and then you have October, November, December, January. But then you're starting to do, preseason games and stuff. So, yeah, again, and this is not to put it all on the players or anything either. I completely agree with you. There's an ecosystem change that needs to happen. There's a mindset change that needs to happen. And I think some of it comes from people needing to be maybe have a fire lit under them by younger players who can push them out. I will tell you this much: watching Jensen play this year, after he didn't get a team, he had a fire under him. He was playing better. Like, you could tell, because teams didn't want him. So this is his profession. He wants to do well at it. There are players like him that I think, I'm just basically, shitting on C9 players unintentionally, but I think we're going to see the same thing, and there are going to be a lot of changes coming, people. Just be prepared. I can tell you that Jeremy and I both know it could be very interesting in terms of the offseason. So keep your eyes peeled, and hopefully we'll start to see some good things. And make sure that you check out our next video, where we're going to dive a little bit deeper into the actual conversation around the viewership things. Or maybe you're coming from just watching that. And if you did, thanks for watching it. We appreciate it.
Maybe you don't want to watch that at all. No,
Yeah.
just kidding.
Or maybe you just hate us. I get it. It's fine. I understand. I don't know why you're here, especially this late into the video at this point if you hate us. But hey, we appreciate your view. Yeah, I mean, with that, he's Germ. I'm Rob. And we'll catch you guys on that next video. Thanks.